So all of this brings us to another of Trump cabinet secretaries who, like Mattis, has increasingly been at odds with the president. But unlike Tom Price, General Kelly apparently stepped in to make sure he did not leave. We're talking about Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and in a blockbuster, brand new exclusive report from NBC News, we're learning that he was on the verge of walking away from his post over the summer, only to be talked out of it by Vice President Pence and Generals Kelly and Mattis. Tensions came to a head around the time President Trump delivered that politicized speech in late July to the Boy Scouts of America, an organization where Tillerson once served as its president. One of the authors of this exclusive NBC News report, national political reporter for NBC News, Carol Lee, and she joins us now. Also with us from Washington, columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius.
So, Carol, what was it specifically about the Boy Scout speech that finally was this? It must have just been the straw that broke the camel's back.
It was, and there were a number of things, if you guys remember, in July or leading up to July, there was this spat between the president and Tillerson over Qatar, where Tillerson said they should resolve this, and then the president came out and backed Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And then you had the Iran nuclear deal, the recertification. Tillerson was arguing with the president to recertify, and that got him. Then they had a confrontation there, and then they had a series of meetings where, after one of them in late July, Tillerson was overheard afterwards talking with cabinet members and White House officials and referred to the president as a moron, and so he was clearly frustrated. And then you have this speech at the Boy Scouts of America to these young people, and it was just all kind of coming together at the same time, and it was a real inflection point for the secretary.
So Kelly kept him there, and Mattis obviously he's very close to General Mattis, Secretary Mattis. They talk every day. What did they do to persuade Rex Tillerson to stay Secretary of State when he's just been treated about as badly as any major cabinet secretary in recent history?
Well, I think they were generally just trying to get him to stay on. Things will get better. We'll work this out. And then afterwards, Tillerson was in Texas at the time, and he came back, and Vice President Pence had a meeting with him where he was described to us as a pep talk, and basically also said, in order to move forward, you need to get on board with the president's program here, and you need to figure out ways to do that. And so there was this broad attempt at this reset, and then as we've seen, it hasn't really stuck.
Well,
we saw this past
him,
weekend.
even with North Korea. Openly.
Right, and then there was this incident at the end of August where Tillerson was asked about the president's response to Charlottesville, and he said, the president speaks for himself. Yeah. And that really irritated the president.
Really quickly, I'm just curious, because he was publicly trolling Rex Tillerson this past weekend, saying, don't waste your time, Rex. Were your calls out at that point to get a response from the president? Did the White House know this story was coming when he was trolling Rex Tillerson?
We had been working on this story for a couple of months, basically since the end of July.
And you had made contact with the White House?
And we had, we had made contact with them previously, and then again on Sunday.
It'll be interesting to see how the president reacts to this report, for someone who can't take any criticism and can't let it go unanswered, being called a moron. What was the context in which Rex Tillerson
calls me a moron all the time.
Well, that's not new. That's hardly news. Yeah. What was the context in which Rex Tillerson called the president a moron? Was it something specific or broad?
We don't know exactly what that specific conversation was, but if you look at where it came after this meeting. There was this July 19th meeting in the Situation Room on Afghanistan where the president really shocked his advisors by comparing the process to a renovation of the 21 Club. Then you had a meeting on July 20th at the Pentagon.
Which, by the way, that story ended up being false. So not only was it an embarrassing comparison,
that's right,
it never happened. Right. 21 was like, what? No, that never happened.
Right. Oh. And then the next day you have this other meeting at the Pentagon, and where, according to our sources, it just had the same tone. It didn't go very well. The president wasn't making a decision, and so you can kind of put his remarks in that context.
David Ignatius is in Washington with the question. David?
Yeah, great reporting, Carol. And the question I have is where this is going to go. There obviously has been growing distance between the White House and Tillerson over both policies and personalities over the last weeks, and your reporting says months. But what happens now, specifically, after this quotation of Tillerson saying the president's a moron, to stay in the cabinet, he's going to have to go to the White House and say, I never said that, sir, I don't believe that. He's going to have to make a show of loyalty, which he's a pretty different guy. Do you think he'll do that? And second, he's very close to Secretary Mattis. As Joe said earlier, they talk every day. Mattis is his strongest defender. Do you think if they try to move to push Tillerson out, how's Mattis going to react to that?
Well, you hit on the key word, which is loyalty. And this is a president that values loyalty above all else. And he was very likely to see this comment as a betrayal. And it's, how he reacts to that, we don't necessarily know. But, if you look at his past behavior, this is something that he would take personally, because it is personal. And so it's very different
yeah,
from
I think he may.
I'm thinking.
than the policy disputes that we've seen these two have in the past.
John Heilman.
Carol, I'm curious just in the very short term here, because of all these things that have been happening, and then you have the exchange over the North Korean diplomacy. Like, what's in this moment? When Trump goes after Tillerson, cuts his knees out from under him over the weekend, what happens at Foggy Bottom? Does Tillerson then throw up his hands in frustration and say, the president's going to undermine me that way in public, I'm fine, I'll just give up on diplomacy? Or is he really in a conscious way saying, no, this is all part of a game, I'm going to continue on the second track that we're trying to establish here?
I think there's definitely frustrations on both sides. I'm talking to people at the White House over the weekend. He just surprised them. It wasn't, he didn't, and their view is, he's over in China and he's saying things without clearing them with the White House, without giving anyone a heads up, without running them through the traps. And that was what caught people off guard and really upset them. And that is something that I think, above all, really has caused a lot of the friction.
Harold Ford.
Carol, you said in some reporting also that at least some reporting suggests that there might even be some clashes with Jared Kushner between Secretary Tillerson. Has that complicated things even more for him? Or better yet, when did that happen on your timeline, and has that complicated things even more?
The Kushner's folks will downplay that there may have been some friction in the past, but that's not the case now, and it's gotten better. But here's the thing about Tillerson: if the president decides to turn on him, it's hard to see who's going to rally to his side. He has no big supporters in Congress, in the White House, and even in his own State Department. And when you're in that sort of dynamic, it's hard to see who's going to try to come in and save him, except for perhaps the two people who did it in July, which is Kelly and Mattis.
Is that a very articulate way to say he's not a part of the Jedi Council?
I still want to know what that is, but I'm going to defer right now to Julie Pace. Julie, jump in.
Hey, Carol, great story. One thing that I thought was really interesting in there, I hope you can expand on a little bit, is there was a reference to Pence having a conversation with Tillerson about Nikki Haley and asking whether Tillerson thought that she was being helpful in the administration. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic between Tillerson and Haley and how that may be affecting his frustrations here? Sure.
There is a lot of tension between the offices of Tillerson and Haley because she is seen as sort of the heir apparent if Tillerson departs his post. That comment came from my conversation with Tillerson's top spokesperson, R.C. Hammond, who, when I called him initially, he said, I don't know what happened in that meeting with Vice President Pence. They talk about policy. And then he called me back and he said, actually, there was one meeting where they talked about something other than policy. And that was when the Vice President asked Tillerson if he thought that Haley was helpful or hurtful to the administration's policies, and that was kind of a very, in my view, overt way of taking a shot at Nikki Haley, and it was surprising.
To read this entire NBC News exclusive reporting on Rex Tillerson, go to NBCNews.com. Carol and Andrea Mitchell will have more on the story ahead on the Today Show. Carol, thank you very much. Andrea will also join us later this morning, and NBC News and MSNBC will have more developments on this exclusive reporting throughout the day and tonight on Nightly News.
Carol, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. When we come back, we're going to be talking to David Ignatius more about this and sort of the chaos that has been going on at the White House, only for about 8.5 months. Also, Tom Cole's going to be here.
Yes, he is.
And we're going to ask Tom Cole whether he's ever been invited to Speaker Ryan's Jedi Council or whether he's stuck on the ice.
Also, the
planet
former governor of Puerto Rico reacts to President Trump's trip to the island and the long road to recovery after Hurricane Maria.
Not them, but the
We'll be
people
right
in the
back.
health. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.